Despicable Me 4 is the 4th film in the Despicable Me line, 6th in the franchise, and 15th from the studio. Now, yes, some of these movies are absolute atrocities, but others are classics since I pretty much grew up on the early Illumination films. And today, I'm going to be ranking all of the Illumination movies from the worst to the best, and before we get into it, let me know your ranking of all 15 films in the comments down below, and over 98% of you guys who watch these videos aren't yet subscribed, so if you don't want to miss out on any more of my reviews or rankings, hit that button, but don't waste any more time. Let's get into it. The tiers we have on screen today are bad, meh, good, great, and best of the best. And starting it off, we have Despicable Me. This is one of my personal all-time great animated movies, not because the animation is spectacular or the story is absolutely amazing. This is just a classic. I vividly remember going to the movie theater to watch this movie, buying Minion toys, buying fart guns, buying every single piece of merchandise that came off of this movie. And again, I don't think it's amazing, but I actually think it works pretty damn well. I think the story of Gru and how he's just an absolute villain and how these girls turn him into not only a father, but just an overall better human being. This one has a lot of heart to it, and I get the hate for other movies, and I get that this franchise has diluted into something completely different, which we'll talk about with Despicable Me 4, but for what this movie specifically is, I think it truly does work. Next up, we have Hop. I'm going to put this in meh, though I do want to start off with a compliment because I think this movie is really interesting on an animation level because it's literally the only animation movie from all of Illumination that isn't purely animation. Like, there is a real world element to it, which I really respect. And if I'm not mistaken, this is like their second or third film. And so this is a risk that they took. I don't think the movie itself is that great, but I think there are a lot of interesting elements to it. I think the human characters are really funny. And overall, this movie does have a lot of great humor, but it's just really not that fun to me. And then we have the Lorax. This one is going in best of the best, and it might end up being the best film of the entire franchise of Illumination. This movie is absolutely amazing. Even aside from just being an animated movie, in general, I love this movie. And again, it might be the bias from when I was younger, but this movie is it's fun, but it's also really, really depressing. And out of all of the Pixar movies, I feel like, out of all of the Illumination movies, this is the one that feels most like a Pixar film in regards to actually having a lot more depth to it. And I think Despicable Me is a second in that regard as well. But the Lorax has a lot of environmental themes. It has a lot of themes about just being a good person in general. And so I think a lot of the Lorax works. I think it's actually pretty underrated. I feel like I don't see many people talking about it. And then we have Despicable Me 2. I think this is a good film. And I feel like this is where a lot of my personal classics from my childhood will fall in now, because I used to think they were great, awesome, super exciting, and really exhilarating films when I was a kid. But Despicable Me 2, I think, does take the franchise in a really interesting direction. I think the villain's name is Macho Libre. He's really, really fun. The Guac hat is so cool to me. I think the villain ideas are really interesting. I think the introduction of Lucy is also really fun. And overall, I think this is where the Minions obviously start to get annoying. They're obviously the most annoying in their own movie, but I think Despicable Me 2 is a damn great sequel, and I'm not saying they should have stopped it here because I think there are other good films in the franchise, but this is the last one where I truly feel like they had a good story to tell. And then we get to Minions. Minions, I'm gonna go bottom of good. I do think Despicable Me 2 is better. I will say, I feel like Minions in and of itself is just a really weird and stupid concept because Minions are inherently supposed to be a side character. They're not really supposed to have much depth to them, and weirdly enough, they do give the Minions some depth in another movie, which I'll talk about in just a second here. But I think actually the evolution of how the Minions survived in the world, that's a really cool concept. I think at a base level, there's a lot of interesting things that they did in this film. There's just really only so far you can get with having side characters be the main characters that don't even speak English. And then we have Secret Life of Pets. This one is going to go at probably the bottom of good. I actually don't remember much about this one and the second film just because I watched them when they originally came out and then never really did anything with them. I find this movie to be fine. I think it's a cool, I'm glad that they didn't just do another sequel. Really felt like Illumination was just trying to capture the lightning in a bottle that made Despicable Me. And honestly, I think after Secret Life of Pets, they made a really good original franchise, which is what we're going to talk about next, which is Sing. Sing is actually going to go Ooh, honestly, I might be able to go top of great. I think Sing, for how corny and stupid it sometimes is, actually has a lot of heart. And I feel like the Lorax is just more of a classic to me because I saw it when I was younger. It was a little more influential on me. But in regards to what genuinely is just exciting but also gets me a little bit emotional is Sing. But next up we have Despicable Me 3, one that I actually recently rewatched, and this one is gonna go at top of meh. I don't think this movie is great, sadly, or even good for that matter. I think it takes a step down from Despicable Me 2 just in regards to we didn't really need this film. I feel like the brother thing was a pretty interesting direction to go in, though I didn't feel like there was really enough turmoil between both of them to make it feel interesting. I feel like a lot of Gru turning into a villain was also super surface level, and I'm not going to be able to talk this in detail about Despicable Me 4 as it is newer and I don't want to give away plot details, but this is kind of the same thing that happens in Despicable Me 4 as well. Just a lot of the motivations feel really singular, whereas in Despicable Me and Despicable Me 2, I feel like there was enough things going at once for you to genuinely think that whatever was happening was believable. And then we have The Grinch. This one I actually find to be super, super interesting. I am going to go in the middle of good. I think I just have bias towards Minions, which puts it higher, but The Grinch isn't anything special, but at least it doesn't do a disservice to the original story that was told in The Grinch. And then we have Secret Life of Pets 2. This is another meh one. It's going to go below Despicable Me 3 just because I have a lot of bias for Despicable Me franchise in general, but Secret Life of Pets 2 is the definition of a movie that did not need to be made. It's like this, and Sing 2, which we'll talk about in just a second here, as you can see, I feel like Sing 2 at least has a little bit of purpose because there's genuine characters that you care about, whereas Secret Life of Pets 2, I didn't give a shit about anyone, and so it didn't really matter. Sing 2, I think I'm just gonna go top of meh. I think, actually no, I feel like my Despicable Me bias is really showing here. Sing 2, it's a good continuation of the Sing franchise, but I also think the dip in quality is so crazy low, whereas if you look at Despicable Me, it goes great, good, meh, even Minions is thrown in good, so I feel like there's not a drastic dip in quality for the Despicable Me franchise. I don't know, I guess a simple way to put it is Sing 2 did not need to be made. Then we have Minions, The Rise of Gru. I think this movie is really, really fun. I'm going to go right underneath Minions. I had a lot of fun with this film, and I truly feel like they gave at least a certain level of depth to the Minions. I genuinely think this might be better than the original Minions movie, but my obviously child bias is telling me that Minions is better. I think Rise of Gru is a good way to bring in another character that actually adds depth to these side characters. And obviously the Minions are still technically side characters in this movie, but I guess since the main plot of the story technically does revolve around them and their mission, it is still them being main characters, but it doesn't feel like that, and that's what works about this movie. And then we have the Super Mario Bros. Movie. Now this one is conflicting. I'm gonna go middle of good, right above Minions. And the reason I say this is because if you look at the Super Mario Bros. Movie, at least to me personally, it stands out amongst the entirety of the Illumination studio and what their work has entailed. It is very, very colorful, and a lot of that is because they're trying to match vibes from the game, and I totally get that. But the reason this can't be any higher, even if maybe it deserves to be on just a pure animation and creativity level, is because I made a video where I spent all day in a movie theater, and this was one of those midday movies, and it made me want to blow my brains out. I felt like I was just laying there and taking in a bunch of colorful mush, and I just wanted to go to sleep. Like, it gave me the craziest headache ever, and it really almost pretty much ruined my entire day. And then we have Migration. This one came out, I believe, in December, and this one is going to go in meh as well. I'll put it above Despicable Me 3 just because I respect the familial elements of it, and it genuinely does feel like it's trying to do something thematically unlike the rest of the films in the meh category. But I have to say, every single film in the good tier is just much more fun. It's much more generally exhilarating, and it just feels more creative. Migration obviously doesn't have like the purple minions and shit like that. It is heartfelt, and it does feel like there is a core to it that isn't really there in little to like no other Illumination movies. And then finally, we of course have the newly released Despicable Me 4. This one is going to go at the bottom of good. This is borderline meh for me, just because I feel like, I mean, honestly, I'm not even comparing these fairly enough to the other films, just mainly Despicable Me movies, because my biggest problem with this movie is that there's so much going on and so much that just feels like they're trying to make new toys, aka like the superhero minions, which I think is fun. It's actually really, really cool. It's fun, it's exciting, and I get it. It'll be very entertaining for little kids. But you do that and you lose so much time out of what makes these movies so exciting from the beginning. And that initial point is just the relationship between Gru and his daughters. And I feel like at a certain point, yes, you do kind of like grow out of that and a character has to move on, but that's what made these movies so good. And Baby Gru is an interesting addition, to say the least, but I feel like we're not even developing anything in the personal realm of Gru at all whatsoever. We kind of just shy away from everything related to the personal core of him and what makes his character super entertaining from the beginning. I will say, even at least Despicable Me 3 had him questioning his commitment to villainy because of his brother and his blood, and how that connection makes him kind of go back to it just a little bit, but it ends up being for something that's bigger than just him and his brother. Whereas in the fourth movie, there's no really personal connection and there's nothing that really drives that home for me. Again, it's obviously still better than everything in the meh category, but I expected a little bit more from this movie, but I always expect a lot from Despicable Me movies because I love this franchise. But that wraps up my ranking for all 15 Illumination films. Again, let me know your ranking for all these films in the comments down below. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Peace.